Welcome to the Unstuck Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Miner. This weekly no-fluff mindset show arms you with the practical tools you need to get unstuck so you can get exactly what you want out of life. Remember, when you change your mind, your life will follow. Let's get into today's episode. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to the Unstuck Podcast. Thanks, as always, for joining me, whether this is your first time or you've listened to all, what do we have now, 28 episodes. Thank you so much. So happy to have you here and so grateful for your support. Today, we are going to get really deep on three very popular, seemingly very boring words. But don't worry, it will all make sense quickly here on the show. Before we get started, I just want to let you know that if you hear something weird in the background, it's just my dog, Harlow, chewing on her bone because I'm trying to keep her busy before we can go on our hike. I want to get this recorded, brought her along with me to the office today. She's my favorite office buddy. I love it so much. If you have been following me over on Instagram, you know that I'm new to being a dog mom. I've had her about 2 months, a little over 2 months now. First time ever having a dog. I've been a dog sitter, but I have not had my own dog, which is really fun. So really great journey. Love it so much. Highly recommend for anyone who is a dog lover that doesn't have a dog to get one because it's the best experience ever. But she has a lot of energy. She's a 1.5-year-old mini Australian Shepherd, and they are very active dogs, and she's 1.5. So she's actually even more active. And so we're hoping that she'll be entertained for this period of time, but just in case, she's got her bone. And if you hear that, I'm not going to bug her. I'm just going to let her chew her bone and you might hear it in the background. All right. Now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about be, do, have. If you've been in the self-improvement, personal growth space at all in the past, then you may have already heard of this model, the be, do, have model. I know there are some pretty significant kind of mindset coaches, self-improvement gurus, like Tony Robbins, I know for sure uses this in his talks and what he practices. So you may have heard it. Just want to let you know that I'm not creating this, but I do think it is really powerful. I know that it helps me at times kind of see where I'm at and really kind of shine a light on what I'm really doing, like how I'm approaching things. So I hope it's going to do the same for you today. And really all it is just another way to go about and kind of think about and see everything that we're doing here on Unstuck. It's just another way to view it or see it. And I think, of course, you're going to notice a ton of similarities in this chat that we have today. I'll also be referencing a lot of past podcasts for you to go back and listen to if you haven't already, or re-listen to if you are finding yourself in this pattern. But I think it's just so important, no matter what we talk about here on Unstuck, first of all, to talk about it over and over and over again. I mean, in my mindset practice, I basically am hearing the same exact message every single morning, and I still need to hear it every single morning. So while it may seem like things are repetitive, this is what we need. This is how we make it a lifestyle and a habit and something we're really actually thinking about. So that's one thing. But I think also it's important to kind of share it in different ways because, of course, people respond and resonate with different messaging. So this approach that we're going to go over today, while it's pretty much the same thing we've talked about in the past, some of you are going to really resonate with how it's approached here, and it will really stick for you in a way that maybe other things haven't, maybe ways that you're still trying to wrap your head around, but yet when we talk about it here today, it clicks. So that's what we're going to do, and we'll continue to do here on Unstuck is like repeat things, but maybe give little tweaks or little, different little ways of approaching things and just continue to build on the same or similar messages, because that's what mindset work is. That's how we create the change. And that's what a practice is. Of course, I mean, even if you go to a yoga practice or you meditate regularly, it's kind of the same thing, right? There's only so many yoga poses. And, the flow is all very much the same, but it's the practice. And it's getting into that flow and getting into that rhythm and really every single time making it a little bit different for you and your body and your mind. So that's the goal here too. So let's kick it off with our quote for today, which is from Zig Ziglar, who actually may be the person that kind of is behind this. I looked for the origin of the Be Do Have, Googled it, spent a few minutes looking, and there wasn't anything that came up as definitely the person who created this model. It could be Zig Ziglar, but I don't know for sure. Anyway, he is definitely the one that quoted this. You have to be before you can do, and do before you can have. Seems logical, seems right, seems like something we definitely want to wrap our heads around and really practice, but do we right now? Or are you really making this a practice? Are you really being before you can do, and then doing before you can have? And most of us are going about it opposite, as we will find out. First, let's take these words separately. I just kind of want to break them down so that we can really understand, at least in terms of mindset work, where these all fit in separately. First, let's start with have. So of course, the definition of have is to possess, to experience, to own. That's kind of summing up the general definition. When we, as a society, as people, think about what we have, we usually go towards our possessions. Like, I have a house, I have a car, I have a job, these things that we have. Or it may even be people in our lives, like I have a partner, I have a child, I have a dog, which I think is basically a child, at least in my world. But you have these things. Or it may even be like an illness or a characteristic of you. So I have a cold, I have an autoimmune disease, I have a birthmark, I have dimples, those kinds of things too. This is all things that we have. But rarely do we go to the emotions that we have. I have gratitude, I have joy, I have peace. And I know it sounds kind of weird when I say those things, because that's not really how we express the emotions that we have. We usually say things like, I'm grateful, or I'm happy, I'm joyful, I'm peaceful. Yes, of course, we use it in that way, but it's really going to help in today's chat and how you go forward with it to think about emotions. When you think about the emotions that you're experiencing, that you have them. It's true. You are experiencing something, which is an emotion, which means that's what we have. We are having that experience. We are owning that emotion. So I want you to think of it this way for the sake of what we're going to talk about today. And of course, as you take what we're learning and start practicing it in your life, think about having an emotion. Now let's look at do. Of course, the definition of do is to perform. So we very much are in a society where we are rewarded for what we do. Like, it is probably one of those most prominent things that we see in our lives and in others' lives, and basically how the whole world works is based on what we're doing. It's that go, go, go mentality. It's that busy mindset. It's the autopilot mode. It is doing. That is what we think will get us what we want. So we do, like, we go to the job, we do our work, we do the workout, we go to the gym, we do the diet in order to get what we want. So we're very much led as a society by doing. And it's so interesting too, because I think most of the time we don't even realize that's what's leading us, because it is like autopilot type mode. But even if you're like, you think you're doing nothing, like you're going to go sit and watch some Netflix, you're going to scroll through Instagram on your lunch break, like you're still doing something. You are still doing. Like that moment is still consumed by you doing, even though for you it's quote unquote nothing. We're still doing. Even driving in the car, things like that. Of course, that's still doing. And that is what takes up like 99% of our time, right? I very much relate to this mentality in myself. It was how I was raised. We very much had the mindset in our home that working hard equates to, making money, being successful, meaning you were smart, you were driven, you're educated. Like that was all, like doing was the way to show all of those things by what you did and all the things going on. That's how you basically showed that you were productive. I mean, in high school, basically my main goal was to get into a certain college. So then it was getting the good grades, doing all the work, doing all the homework, going to all the classes. But then it was also doing all the extracurricular stuff, getting into the honor society. So doing the work you needed to get into that, being on student council. So getting into that and doing all the work you needed to get into that, being on the homecoming committee, just all these things. It was a constant state of doing. And then, of course, for me, that doing mentality just continued throughout my life, and now is something I'm still working on, which we'll talk about a little bit more. I'm still working on because that's something that is very much still ingrained in me, is to constantly be doing. Now, for the sake of this discussion, I also want to consider doing as more than just our physical tasks, but in the mental doing. The constant chatter that we have going on in our head, which we now know is our ego, which comes from our stories, our limiting beliefs that we have going on in our subconscious mind. We've learned about all of that. And if you haven't, you will if you start going back into the archives of the Unstuck podcast. Basically, all of them will be helpful for you in this work, but we'll talk about some one specifically coming up. So it's that constant chatter, the mental muck, as I like to call it, all that muck that's going on that's really clogging up our headspace, the to-do list in our heads, these things. Like there's a lot of mental goings on in our head, which is why even when you are just watching Netflix or scrolling through Instagram or even just, trying to meditate, there's still a lot of mental doing, which of course meditation is great to start undoing. That's one of the best things to do, of course, but there's still a lot going on in there. And I want us to keep in mind that kind of stuff too. So yes, we have the physical doing, but we have mental doing too, which just compounds the amount of doing going on in our lives. Now let's look at B. So the definition of B is to exist. I love this word. If you